Greetings, Guzzlers. We're going to make some oven-dried jerky, beef jerky. Now, normally, obviously, it would go in like a smoker or a drying oven, but we're going to do it in the oven. So we're going to use sort of a typical marinade, but because we're not doing it in like a smoker, what I've got here is some liquid smoke. So that's what we're going to make. So you're going to need some dried chilies, some salt, some ground black pepper, soy sauce, cider vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, and some of this liquid smoke, and then obviously a bit of beef. Now you could use a nice steak. If you're going to do that, freeze it. It'll make it really easy to slice it. I'm cheating. I've bought some already pre-sliced beef. So let's get making jerky. Right, so I've got a bowl to do my marinating, and what I've put in there is a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of fresh ground black pepper, a few cloves of garlic crushed up. Okay, I've added 70 mils of dark soy sauce, 70 mils of Worcestershire sauce, and I'm about to add 70 mils of cider vinegar. Okay. Now, still need to be chilli flakes, but I need to chop them up. Now we're going to add our liquid smoke. Now this is quite potent stuff. You don't want to overdo it. So we're just going to use a teaspoon of that. Okay. And so, final thing we need to add is about, excuse me, some chilli flakes, about a tablespoon of crushed up chopped chilli flakes. So I'm just going to get that done, and then we'll be ready to do the meat. So, got the chilli flakes in there. Now, when it comes to the meat, like I say, you could use a steak. I think I said that, but if I didn't, you could use a nice steak. Because we're not necessarily doing it the normal way, trim off all the fat. You can leave it on if you like, all right? Excuse me. I think a bit of pepper there. A lot of debate, do you cut across the grain, with grain, or whatever? Well, I ain't got a lot of choice with this because this is already pre-cut, okay, into thin slices. So all I'm going to do is cut myself some strips, okay, and then we're just, for now, going to plonk that into the marinade, and in a minute, when we're sort of ready, and when we've got all the beef cut, what we'll do is we'll give it a good old mix together. So that's my meat into that marinade, and what we're going to do is we're now just going to mix it around, make sure we get every piece of that meat thoroughly covered in the marinade, and then we're going to let it sit for an hour in the fridge. Okay, now you could do it longer, do it overnight if you like, but given the size of this meat and everything else, that should more than, you know, pick up the flavours we want. But really, that stage is up to you. Longer if you want, but a minimum of an hour really. Okay, and then once that's over, we'll be bringing it out and we'll put it on a rack. Now you'll want to get yourself a nice baking tray so that will catch the drips, and ideally do it on a rack, you know, like your cooling rack you'd have for cakes, things like that, because otherwise part of the way through the drying you'll need to flip it. If you do it on a rack, hopefully the air gets underneath and it will dry fairly evenly without you having to turn it over. So that's ready now to go into the fridge. So I'll see you when that hour's gone by. So that's had an hour marinating. So like I said, I've got my tray with a rack and a drip tray underneath. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give that a quick mix around, pull out each strip, let it drain a bit, and then just going to lay it out on the rack. Okay. Now that meat should have soaked up obviously a lot of the flavour. You could, if you want, just dab some of that off. I'm not going to bother. Obviously that might make it just last, you know, take a little bit longer to dry out. But like I say, these are quite thin strips, okay? And all we're going to do is put it into the oven, which is about 70, okay? A convection oven with a fan, so that makes it even better at drying it. And we're now just going to do it for anything up to about 4 hours, okay? It's obviously going to be a bit slow because that's not a very hot oven. So I'm just going to get this all lastly laid out, and then we'll put it in the oven. So I've just made enough to go onto one rack here, okay, and so now that's going to just go into that oven, like I say, and I'll check on it after about an hour. Obviously how dry you want it is entirely up to you, whether you want it sort of quite flexible or whether you want it quite dry and chewy, more chewy. Obviously that's up to you, but we'll obviously have a check in a bit. There's the jerky in the oven. So this is just under 3 hours, okay? You can see that it's still quite flexible. I did try it earlier and it was a little bit soft, but I decided I want it a little bit dry. So let's just try a bit. Okay, it's warm out of the oven, but it's not exactly hot, is it? So a bit of chew to it, but not too tough. Get the sweetness, which I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. Get a bit of smoke, but definite tang of vinegar. Don't really get the chilli hit. But there you go, beef jerky.